From the Alluring Bead Boutique. And in my blog, over on the blog, I've been working on a Bead Weaving 101 series for several months now. And to accomplish that, I've been working through the stitching portion of the 2019 Bead and Button Bead Stitching Handbook, which is a really neat book because I've learned a lot from it. I will put my affiliate link in the description box below. And of course, if you purchase that using that link, I would make a little bit of a commission. But I have several links of it too over there on the blog. Now in this portion of Bead Weaving 101, we've been working on herringbone stitch for the past several weeks. So we started out with flat herringbone stitch. We took a look at the traditional start for flat herringbone. We have looked at accelerated herringbone. We have looked at increasing and decreasing the herringbone stitch. We've also worked on tubular herringbone and 2 different ways to start that type of bead stitching project. We talked about the increase and decrease method being the same no matter whether you're working in a flat stitch or tubular form. And today what I want to talk about is how you can utilize a variety of beads in a herringbone stitch project. So I just went through my little bead stash here, and I've gotten out several kinds of beads. So I have some 2-hole crescent beads. I have some tilas, which are another 2-hole bead. I have some bugle beads. I've got some 4mm fire polish beads. I've got some drop beads, which are these little spikes with a single hole, but the hole is side drilled, so it runs side to side. I did my base in these 11-0 Miyuki round beads. And I've got some 11-0 Miyuki delicate beads here. So I've just picked out just a random variety of items so that we can talk about how you might incorporate these different types of beads into a bead stitching project. So to get started in a herringbone project, of course, you can either use the traditional method for creating your base beads, or you can use ladder stitch, is what I'm using here. I'm using a 2-bead high ladder stitch technique that I have reviewed before here on YouTube and over on my blog. And I'll throw you guys a couple of links, for ladder stitch basics above. Right now I have 8 beads wide and 2 beads tall. So before you can start utilizing some of these other beads into your project, you're going to want to take some measurements. So basically, say for example, these bugle beads, if I want to turn these beads horizontally, I'll need to make sure that how many columns across wide these bugle beads are. So right here you'll see that they're slightly over 2 columns wide, but they work really nice in the middle of a project like this. So they will work just fine if I want to turn these beads on the horizontal plane. Of course, if you're working with them vertically and you want to just make a stitch like this, you just pick up your 2 like you normally would. Take your stitch. Be really careful with your threads on the sharp edges of these bugles. But anyhow, when you pull those into place, you can see that they basically are the same size as an 11-0 seed bead on the end here. So they work really well on the vertical as well. And the same thing holds true with 2-hole beads such as this tila bead. When you take it and measure it horizontally, you can see also that it works really well over 2 columns like this. You can also choose to stitch these beads in vertically. They are the same size because they're a square. They're usually the same height as they are width. So you would just simply sew the bead, drop your bead down, come back through the other hole, and then come down the next column like that. And you can sew those vertically also. So let's get started doing a little bit of stitching here. So I've got my 8 columns on. And I have stepped up through this second to the last bead here on the bottom. Then I stepped up through the top bead here on the edge in order to situate myself on the opposite side of my tail thread here. And so usually I like to start by doing 1 round of herringbone. So I'm going to use these delicas for my first round. And I'm going to go ahead and just do regular herringbone and add a row of the delicate beads. I use this round bead here as a base because it creates a little border. It gives some pattern, texture, and variety to the beadwork. And those are design concepts that I've been going over with you folks also on the blog in the Jewelry Designs Basic series. So what I've done here is I've went through and I added one more row of my Delica beads so that I could tie the previous row of Delica beads all together and give myself a little bit firmer foundation for turning my bugle beads on the horizontal plane. So let's go ahead and show you guys what that looks like and how you would go about it. So I'm just sitting here looking at this cute little thing, and wouldn't it be pretty if you added a set of ladder stitched round beads here at the top and create that beautiful little component? That would be really lovely. But since I'm not really making a project, what I'm doing is just showing you guys how to do these beads. Alright, so now I want to try turning this bugle bead onto the horizontal plane and adding it into the beadwork. And normally what I would try to do is, if I were really designing right now, is I would try to fit it somewhere here in the center, like this. And you could do that really easily. You could take your first herringbone stitch here, step up. You could do the same technique, which you do for our odd count stitch right here, come up through this bead, and then add a bugle bead there, do the odd count technique here, step up and do a stitch on the end. But because we're just practicing, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add first a stitch of my Delicas. I'm going to add another set of Delicas right here on the outside edge. Then I'm going to step up into the next column. I'm going to pick up this bugle bead. I'm going to let it go all the way down. Here's when I'm going to turn it this way, like so. So what basically it's going to look okay if I skip over this bead, and come down through the bead on the 5th column, just like this. And if I were doing this for real, I probably would have not chosen to use white thread. I'm just using white thread because it's easier for you to see. So now I'm going to step up into the top bead on the 5th column and add the mirror image set of Delica beads that I have here. I'm going to add those on this side. So pick up 2 and come down. Then I'm going to do my step up, obviously, that we do at the end of every round. And come up those last 2 beads at the top. So there we have added this cute little bead horizontally. To add the next row, so I'm going to pick up my 2 Delicas and I'm going to pass down the next Delica. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a Delica and I'm going to come through the same bugle bead. Right there. Pull my bead in. Like that. I'm going to pick up another Delica and I am going to sew up the next Delica. Just like that. Then I'm going to take the last stitch of this round. Just simply pick up the 2 Delicas, pass down the next, and then do my turnaround. You my step up. Turning around by going under the thread bridge, stepping up by coming up the 2 beads on the top of my outside column. And I'm ready to turn around and do another row. So I'm going to add one more row using these bugles on the horizontal. So I'm just going to take my stitch just like I would normally, come down 1. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to step up into just that bead I added on this side of my bugle bead right here. Now I can pick up my next bugle And I can sew down through the bead on the other side of that previous bugle bead, like so. Get that bead sitting in there nice and pretty like that. Then I'm going to step up through the top bead on the next column. So in essence, what I had to do it that the row before this one, we had to add in a bead so that we could continue on with our herringbone. So now we're going to take the last stitch. Pick up 2. Come down 1. Pass under the thread. And step up the top 2. I'm going to flip it and step up. It's a little bit easier for me to see on this side today because of my lighting situation. And there we go, stepping up through the 2 top beads. And so now we have these cute little horizontal bugle beads added in. Let's take a look at how you would go about using a tila bead in here. And the principle is pretty much the same, but we do have to make an adjustment because these beads have 2 holes. So let's go ahead and start our row. I'm going to pick up my 2 delicas, take my first stitch. I'm going to step up into that delica we put beside the bugle, just like we did before. And this time I'm going to pick up this 2-hole bead, and I'm going to sew that in. So what I'm going to do is sew down this bead on the opposite side of the bugle right here, or sew across it in the downward angle like that, just like we did when we added that other bugle bead. And then we're going to step up into the top bead of the next column. Take the next stitch. Take the last stitch, I should say. Turn around. And when you're doing this stitch, make sure your threads don't get hung up on your previous beadwork or down here at the bottom. Alright, so now I'm ready to do my next row. I'm going to come down, pick up 2, come down 1. This time, because I have this lovely 2-hole bead, all I need to do is pick up this delica and sew into the top hole. Pick up another delica and step up into the 5th column. And take the last stitch. So you can see it's really cool and easy to switch over to a 2-hole bead. Now this is using the 2-hole tila bead on the horizontal. So I've got the bead holes going horizontally. So a little bit different. To use them vertically, basically it's exactly the same as you doing these beads vertically, but we'll look at it closer here just in a minute. And get my step up. And there we have added a 2-hole bead. So now let's take a look at how we can bring this all back to delicas above this 2-hole bead. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first stitch, just like we always would, normally would. Pick it up. We're going to step up through that delica on the closest side of your 2-hole bead there. So now that we're exiting from this delica, we're going to have to pick up to cross over top of our 2-hole bead. And we're going to pick up 4 beads. We're going to pass down the delica on the other side. If I can get my needle in there. There we go. Just through that next delica. We're going to step up into the delicate on the 5th column, take the last stitch and do the turnaround. Pass under the thread bridge and come up through the 2 beads on the end. So now we're ready to tie all these beads back together so that we have 8 columns of beads and 4 herringbone stitches running across this row. So to do that, we're just going to take the first stitch like we always do, pick up 2, pass down 1, step up into the next one, we're going to pick up 2, pass down the next one. So in essence, we're splitting these 2 pairs and step up into the next one. And this is something we went over, when we were doing increasing and decreasing. You just want to make sure those 2 little beads position themselves like the inverted V you normally see when in herringbone. We're going to pick up 2 and pass down that 4th one. Position our beads. And step up into the 5th column and take the last stitch. And I'm going to flip it over as I work so that it's easier for me to do my turnaround. Now we have our original 4 stitches across with 8 columns. And as we come back through and add this next row, we're going to tie all of that together and close up some of these gaps right here. So let's take that last row. And it'll look more like it does at the bottom end of the beadwork after we do this row. And I apologize, guys. It's so dark and cloudy here today, I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing. I want to make sure that you can see, and it just makes it a little bit harder for me to see underneath this camera. You can see now that we're getting more of an identical appearance up here that we have down here. And we can do the last stitch. I'm going to flip it around. Pass down 1 and step up. So now let's talk about how, if we want to use these tilas vertically. So we just pick up 1 bead, pass back down the next toe, and come through the top bead of the previous row, like this. Step up into our next column. We're going to pick up the next tila bead, drop it down, come down the next toe and the delicate bead of the previous row, step up, and just repeat those steps till we get to the end. Come down the second hoe and the next delicate bead below it. And you can see that because of these beads are still quite, they fit in here, but what they're doing is they are increasing the width of our work as we come across. Pass down the last bead. And then you would just step up, following the same steps we've been doing for stepping up. And we would come up through the top 2 beads, so that would be the delica and then the outside hole of our tila. And to tie this back together, we would basically just have to do the delicas across the top, just like we've been doing. So let's show you how to do that since we've got these big beads. It's the same thing we did with the bugles. We would pick up 2 delicas. We would pass down just the second hole of the tila. And as we step up into the next tila, we are connecting those 2 tila beads and pulling them together. Yeah, like I said, I'm having a really difficult time finding the hole because I can't see that well today. It'd be easier for me if I flip my work. Pick up my 2 delicas, pass down the second hole of that tila bead, the second tila bead, step up into the third one, and again, I'm just using the 2 holes of my tila beads on this round. I'm going to come down the last hole of that tila, go under that thread bridge, and come back up. The tila and the delica bead on the outside edge. And then as you did your next round, obviously it would pull and put a thread bridge between this delica and this one and this one, this one and this one. And kind of pull the work back into position like that. So what I did, I went ahead and pulled that stuff back off because basically, as you could see from where I added all 4 of those tila beads, it wound up when I tried to come back through and bring it all back together, it was bunching, the beadwork was bunching my tilas over top of each other and crunching them together. A better way of doing that would be to use the increase method that we talked about in the last video and blog post, and increase this beadwork just a little bit in between these 4 stitches here of herringbone. So you would increase, you can work an increase between columns 2 columns 3, between column 4 and column 5, and between, between 2 and 3, between 4 and 5, 2 and 3, 4 and 5, and 6 and 7, right there. So in between is where you can work an increase. And then you can use the, your design concept, fit these beads in a little bit better using an increase method, so that when you bring it back around, it's not crushing the beads and they don't overlap. The same situation holds true if you want to add bigger beads in. So say I wanted to start adding some fire polish beads in here. I could potentially just go ahead and stitch these 2 beads vertically, position them over top of the delicate beads like this. But you can see that they're so much bigger that when I go to try to bring this up, and not to mention they look terrible because they're too big, you would want to work an increase before you actually add a bead that's that much bigger. All right, great. So I can position this bead vertically as well. To do this, what I would do is I would pick up my 4mm bead plus 2 of my delica beads. I'm exiting from the top of that second delica. I'm going to pass through the first delica from the bottom to the top. I'm going to pull those 2 beads so that they sit side by side like this. I'm going to come down through that second bead, down through my 4mm and down through the delica bead on my next column. And in essence, what I have done is square stitch those two beads to sit side by side on top of my 4mm bead. And I've pulled this 4mm bead into a vertical position over my base herringbone row. Now I would just step up into that next column. Let me show you that one more time. I would pick up my 4mm bead plus 2 of my delicas. And let them drop down so they sit on that next set of herringbone columns here. I'm exiting the top of that second bead. I am going to pass my needle from bottom to top through the bead below it, this delica, in this direction. Pull it into position so that those two beads now sit side by side. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to come back through that second bead, my 4mm bead, and that delica on the herringbone, which is actually on the 4th column there of my herringbone below. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm setting myself up to do herringbone across these top beads here above my 4mm, just like that. Well, here's what happened. After I passed down through that delica, I'm sorry guys, I forgot to step up. And it does happen. So basically, don't let it frustrate you too much. Just take everything off, rethread your needle, and do your step up, and then start over. So here I have my 4mm and my 2 delicas. I'm going to skip over this one, and I'm going to sew up from bottom to top through that first one I picked up. Then I'm going to pull it nice and snug, just like that. I'm going to sew down the second one, the 4mm bead, and the herringbone delica below. And then this time, I'm going to try to remember to step up into the 5th column. And just repeat that. So let's pick up the last one. Drop them down. Skip one. Sew up through the first one in the opposite direction. So we back up. Pull them nice and snug. Come back down through the second bead, the 4mm bead, and the herringbone bead on the last column there. To do the step up, we're just going to do the same one we've been doing. We're going to come under that thread bridge from the previous herringbone. And this time, when we step up, we're going to actually be stepping up through 3 beads. So I'm going to come through that delica, that 4mm, and the delica on the far side, sitting above that. Because we actually basically did 2 rows of beadwork at one time. So we had to step up through 3. So now all I need to do is position this work so that the thread is facing the outside edge. And I would just simply do my herringbone and sew back across. So I'm going to flip my work around and we'll go ahead and do that. Pick up my 2 beads, sew down the next bead. Step up into the next bead, which is that delica above my 4mm. And just repeat that till we get all the way across. Pick up 2, sew down 1, step up 1. You might have to play around and decide which bead you want to step up through. Step up and take the last stitch. And then I have one more concept I want to show you guys, and that is about using drop beads. So now, because I have a thread bridge, in actuality I have a thread bridge. I'm coming out the bottom of this bead. I have a thread bridge here, but I don't have one between this delica and that fire polish. If I were to go under this thread bridge right here and pass back up, I'm just going to pull my beads off. So what I need to do is come down through the fire polish. Don't let that get hung on your beads up there. Then I am going to pass under this thread bridge and come back up through the fire polish plus those 2 beads on the end, which I skipped one. So I have to come at it from this direction. And now I am turned around and stepped up. The last thing I want to show you guys in this variety, herringbone with a variety of beads, I want to show you guys about a couple of things about some drop beads. So you can use drop beads in your herringbone designs. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first stitch. We do that a lot with this variety of beads. So I'm going to take this first stitch, and what I want to do is I want to put a drop bead between my columns here. Between my stitches, I should say, because I have 8 columns, we have 4 stitches. So on every other column, as I step up, I can put a drop bead in right there. Because I've got these little spike beads out. And what you would do to position it to see if you have room is you would need to turn it this way and take a look at that hole orientation across to the next bead. And so that's a little bit big. So what I would normally do before I added that bead is I would add an increase bead. So before I step up, I'm going to pick up a delica and step up. Give myself a little more room. I'm going to do that all the way across on this row, just adding my herringbone on my down stitch, adding 1 increase bead on my up stitch right here. I got 2 more to do. So I'm going to take this stitch. Actually, I have 1 more increase to do. Pull my beads into position, pick up my 1 increase bead, step up, and then I'm going to take my last stitch and do my turnaround and step up here on the end. And get my needle into position. All right, so now I have a little bit more room in here in between my stitches. So first thing I'll do is I'm going to take this first stitch. I'm going to sew down. And on the blog post, I used some magatamas, and they looked really cute. So now I'm going to pick up this little spike bead. And I am going to sew up the next bead. You can see how that puts the little bead facing outwards on this plane. I'm going to do that a couple more times. So I'm going to take my next herringbone stitch, pick up my bead, sew down 1, and potentially I may have wanted to increase to 2 beads. But for purposes of this video, I'm just going to do the 1. But as you're working in your own designs, you'll want to play around with that to make sure you have enough room in there so everything's not all pulled together and looking all bulky and crazy. But now there's my second one. And I'm already stepped up, so what I can do is take my next stitch, pick up the last one, and step up. And then take my final stitch. I'm just going to flip my work around, do my little funky turn and step up here, because I'm at the end of my row. You might have to poke your needle just a little bit to get stepped up. Okay, so now I'm stepped up. Now I have those cute little spike beads. Now this is a way to add some beautiful texture to your work, because these beads are going to be sitting above like this. It also adds a little bit of movement to the beadwork, which is another design concept that I have talked about before. So now let's see what we need to do going back across. So I'm going to flip this over and sew back in the other direction. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my first stitch, of course, pick up 2, pass down 1. Then I'm going to pick up my delica, 1 delica, and step up. And this keeps me from having any exposed thread, and it also makes sure that anything on this side of the beadwork looks exactly the same on that side of the beadwork. And I did things a little differently with those magatamas in the blog post. If you want to check that out, just head over to the corresponding post on the alluringboutique.com. Oops, I almost forgot to pick my increase bead up. So I picked up 2, pass down 1, pick up 1, and then step up 1. And I'm going to finish this row off. Pick up 2, pass down 1, pick up 1, step up 1. Take my last stitch. This is a pretty advanced tutorial. But I did want to do this. I've been wanting to do this one for a while. We did it with square stitch, and I thought that we would do it with this stitch also. So there we have this beautiful little piece of beadwork. We've got bugle beads, we've got tila beads, we've got fire polish beads, we've got drop beads. And then you could continue on. You can maybe add one more drop, or you could just continue adding drops every other row. And then you don't have any exposed thread back here on the back side. Alright guys, I think that's going to be enough for today. It's been a really long video. It's going to take me a pretty good while to edit it. And I will get it up to you just as soon as I can. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Look for, coming soon, I should have a couple of new videos out. I'm going to do a new version of my new subscriber video. I'm going to do a new version of my returning subscriber video. I'm going to do a video that discusses my plans for the membership option that I now have on YouTube. I've been thinking about that for several weeks now. And I've made some pretty good decisions, I think, about how I want to work between my free content, my membership content, and my blog patterns, etc. It's taken me a little bit of thought because I have so many things going on, and I'm trying to figure out a way to combine everything where I can still make a little bit of money and support my channel and support all the free content that I do provide, and then also eliminate some of the wasted time and offer up a few new cool things. All right, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.